In the previous segment, assuming you were there with me, what did we do? We actually modified two standard HTML tags, the H1 and the H2, heading 1, heading 2. By applying a CSS rule, we changed their font, style, color, a couple of things, not much, because there's so much more that you can do with CSS rules. They're called categories. We only looked at one text. So our goal in this segment is to go through those different categories and look at the possibilities. I have the tag rule HTML document open, as you can see. What I want you to do is go to the CSS styles panel. I moved mine back over here. Select H1. And then go into this button right there and click it, which is Edit That Rule. This is what we did in the previous segment. But as you can see, there's a whole lot more going on over here. Let's start with background, because we already changed this stuff. In background, you can change the background color. But understand, it's not the color of the text, it's the color of the background behind the text. So you can click this button right here and have at it. Choose any color you want, or say none, which is the default. Background image. You got two options. None, again, which is default, and URL, which means click this button and find it. Now, if you put an image in, then you can use this stuff down here. Background repeat. You have repeat, repeat X, repeat Y, and no repeat. Repeat's the default. We have all seen tiled images in backgrounds. That's exactly what repeat does. You have a repeat X and a repeat Y. Y is vertical, X is horizontal. Andy, I don't want it to tile. I want it to go up, down, left, or right. There you go. No repeat, slap it on the screen. You also have down here background attachment. You've got scroll or fixed. Fix means stick it there based on these positioning elements here and don't move it. Scroll's interesting. Scroll will move the image based on the scroll done by the client with their browser. As they scroll, the image moves. That's kind of cool. Down here is the positions. You have left, center, right, or a value. For example, if you want an image right in the middle of the page, you can say background image and then go center, center, and there it will be. Those are the background options and categories for a rule. The next category is block. Now in block you have word spacing. That's the space between words, enter value. Letter spacing can be negative or positive. That's the space literally between the letters themselves. Vertical align allows me to align like a superscript, a subscript, whatever you want. Text align is obvious, left, center, right, justify. Text indent indents the text off the left border. White space has three options. Normal is the default. It's kind of what you see up there right now. Pre will wrap the text within a PRE tag, which allows me things like Microsoft Word to space and tab, and it'll work. No wrap will only wrap the text if it encounters a BR, a break tag. So those are the options for block. Our next option is box. Now in box, you have width and height, and that determines the width and height of the element. You have a float option, which sets which side other elements like divs and tables and that will float around your element, and you have, of course, left and right or none. You have clear. Now that determines which side they'll be eliminated from in a sense. So if you say clear to the left, that means if you've got another element, a table or a div, whatever it is, and it's on the left, it won't stay there, it'll drop it down. That's what clear does. Padding basically pads the document. So for padding, it specifies the amount of space between the content of the element and its border. Same for all allows you to change them all at the same time. Margin specifies the amount of space between the border of the element and another element. And of course, you can click same for all there. Let's check out border category. In border, you can choose border, and the style can be any one of these. Dash line, solid, whatever you want. You can choose a width and a color. If you say same for all, it's going to do the same on the top and the right and the bottom of the left, or you can choose to turn that off and do something different for each side if you want to go crazy. That's border. Our next option is list. Now for list, you have a style type, and you have a lot more than HTML will give you. You got all kinds of stuff here. You can even say none and still have a list. However, you do have the ability in CSS to add an image. If you have an image you would like to use, for example, as a bullet point, that's pretty cool. You click Browse and go for it. And then the position. You have basically two, inside or outside. Now what outside does is it's the list items will wrap and they will indent, which is the one I use almost all the time. Outside, they won't indent. They'll go back to the left margin. That's list category. Our next category, and there's only two to go, is positioning. Positioning positions the element. For example, the first option right here is absolute, fixed, relative, or static. Static's the default. What absolute does is it places the content, and you're using the coordinates that are entered here. And those are very important to all four of these. But it uses the coordinates that are entered there, and it places your particular box or element relative to the nearest other box or element, assuming they work that way. If that doesn't work, it'll put it and place it based on the upper left-hand corner of the screen. What fixed does, again, based on your placement option, it always puts the element in the upper left-hand corner of the screen. What relative does is it places the element based in content block with text and floats it with the text. Static does the same thing, but it always fixes and places it within that document. Visibility, next one over. You have inherit. Now, inherit's something we haven't gotten into yet. Cascading is an operative word in style sheets. Some, in a sense, are more important, like a parent and a child. You may have heard that relationship in programming. That's where that comes in. We'll talk about that later. You have a visible and hidden. Visible means you see it. Hidden means you don't. See, why would I have anything, Andy, that you can't see? How about rollovers? How about a rollover? When you roll over it, it becomes visible. You can do that, and that's where you start the process. I love Z-index because in the entire history of web design, until CSS came out, we did not have the ability to do something, go to the third dimension. We have, in a sense, layers, almost like Photoshop. In other words, we can stack things on top of each other. We could never do that before. The value number determines exactly where it is in the stack. And our last option up here is called overflow. And what overflow does is it actually determines what happens if the contents of the container exceeds its size. And we have visible, hidden, scroll, or auto. Down here, of course, is the placement. And that specifies the location and size of the content block. And it relates also to our positioning option that we talked about. And clip defines the part of the content that's visible. If you specify a clipping region, and you can do that by entering those values, you can then access that information with a scripting language, which we're not going to get into today, but we can clip, in other words, what we see. Those are the positioning options in category. Ready for the last set? We're almost done. Go to extensions. In extensions, you have page break before and page break after. Now that's for printing. How many times have you printed something from an internet page, and when it prints, it actually scrolls off the page as it's printing? You can determine on the printer when that breaks. I love this feature. Your visual effect, you can change the cursor. In other words, when your cursor is hovering over the element, you can have it change right here. You can have a text button, a weight button, a default, up to you. And the last one is filters, even things like blur, chrome, color, drop shadow. So when your cursor moves over that element, it would actually apply one of these filters. You can get a whole lot more of these on the Adobe site in the Exchange area. These comprise all of the rules for any element that we design in CSS that we can apply to almost anything on our web pages. There is a lot of power here.